Karoline Leavitt thought she could say whatever she wanted and walk away clean. But one comment, aimed squarely at Jasmine Crockett, sparked a legal and cultural firestorm that would end her career. Overnight, they weren't even 15 minutes into the live panel when the air shifted. Broadcast coast to coast from a political summit in Austin, Texas, the roundtable featured seasoned voices from law, media, and Congress. But the heat didn't come from policy disputes or party lines. It came from one calculated smirk. Jasmine Crockett, Congresswoman from Dallas, had just made a calm but incisive point about how race complicates the way leadership is perceived in Washington. There's a constant pressure to be palatable, she said, especially for women like me. If I'm direct, I'm aggressive. If I'm quiet, I'm unqualified. That tension is real. Then Karoline leaned forward, smile curled at the edge of her mouth, and dropped the match. Well, maybe, she said, her tone dripping with sarcasm. If some people stopped playing the victim and actually acted like leaders instead of running a victimhood campaign, we'd see more respect in politics. A pause, the kind that stings. Jasmine didn't. Speak. Not yet. The moderator fidgeted. The audience rustled. Karoline wasn't finished. And honestly, Jasmine, she added, people don't take you seriously. Not because of your skin tone, sorry, but because you act like the world owes you something. That's not leadership. That's entitlement. The room went still. Even the crew held their breath. Jasmine didn't flinch. I don't need anyone to owe me anything, she said, voice low and steady. I work for my community. I speak with conviction because I carry generations behind me. And if that makes people uncomfortable, good. No raised voice, no theatrics, just truth. Measured and immovable. Within minutes, the internet exploded. Clips were cut, reposted, dissected. Dr. Crockett vs. Leavitt trended before the segment even ended. TikTok creators layered Karoline's comments over footage of past dog whistle moments. Podcasters called it a live case study in racial gaslighting. Producers behind the scenes scrambled. The network's PR team drafted emergency statements. Karoline's team messaged her in a frenzy. Backtrack, clarify, apologize, say something. She didn't. When the cameras cut to commercial, she just shrugged and said loud enough for the crew to hear. I said what everyone's thinking. She just didn't like hearing it. She had no idea what she'd just ignited. What Karoline called straight talk. Millions saw for what it was. Calculated humiliation wrapped in condescension. But Jasmine, she didn't storm off. She didn't cry. She stayed seated, adjusted her mic, and waited for the segment to resume. When it did, she picked up right where she left off. Still calm, still composed, no reaction. But every word from that point forward rang louder because of the silence that had preceded them. By nightfall, it wasn't just politics. It was culture. Legal scholars weighed in. Sociologists broke down the layers of bias in Karoline's tone and framing. Morning show panels declared it textbook-coded rhetoric under the guise of debate. And Jasmine's team? They were already gathering receipts, video, transcripts, legal memos. Because this wasn't just an insult. It was character assassination, aired live in prime time. The real shift came hours later, when an anonymous former staffer of Karoline's leaked private messages, exposing a strategy behind the insult. Poke, provoke, make her snap. It was planned. By sunrise, the clip had been viewed over 12 million times. YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram Reels. Even the networks that aired it couldn't stop replaying it. But it wasn't just the words. It was the visuals. Karoline's smirk, Jasmine's silence. One woman leaned into the insult. The other bore the weight of it without blinking. A high school teacher in Memphis played it during a civics lesson. A pastor in St. Paul preached about it on Sunday morning. Students in Arizona printed Jasmine's quotes and taped them to campus. Bulletin boards beneath signs that read, "Words carry weight." So do consequences. Still, Karoline had defenders. Conservative media rallied behind her. She just told the truth, said one talk show host in Tampa. People are too sensitive. If we can't challenge race-baiting narratives, what's left? But the tide had already turned, and Jasmine, she never once repeated Karoline's name in public, never tweeted about the panel, never called for a boycott. She didn't have to, because power doesn't always need a microphone. Sometimes it just needs the world to see you not flinch. What are we even doing in America anymore? That was the common cry on cable news and comment threads. But others tried a more strategic spin. It wasn't racist, just blunt. She didn't say anything untrue. Why can't we criticize people of color without being labeled? But that tactic didn't land. Not this time, because the clip didn't exist in isolation. Within hours, journalists began unearthing Karoline Leavitt's past, the breadcrumbs she'd left behind. A 2019 college speech mocking the concept of implicit bias. A 2021 podcast where she laughed about code switching to keep white people comfortable. A deleted tweet calling Congresswoman Crockett aggressive with a dash of ghetto. Each resurfaced moment stacked on top of the last, until the pile was too heavy to dismiss. And Jasmine, she didn't do a media blitz. She didn't issue fiery statements. Just before midnight, she posted a single tweet. Words have power. So does silence. My team and I are reviewing all options. Accountability matters. That was all it took. Within minutes, the tweet had gone viral. Thousands of retweets. Civil rights organizations issued official statements before sunrise. Prominent attorneys voiced their support. Celebrities reposted the clip with captions like, "This is why we speak out. We got your back." By lunch, Jasmine Crockett was trending on 5 platforms, not because she sought the spotlight, but because it had found her. Back in Dallas, her district office was flooded with flowers, handwritten letters, and thousands of emails. One note scribbled on lined notebook paper read, "My daughter saw you speak and told me she wants to run for office one day. Thank you for staying calm when they tried to break you." But Jasmine wasn't thinking about the attention. She was thinking about the precedent. "I'm not doing this for clicks," she told her chief of staff, Samira, in a closed-door meeting that afternoon. "This can't be about the moment. It has to be about the message." Samira didn't even blink. "So, we go legal?" Jasmine didn't hesitate. "Yes, all the way." They weren't naive. Taking on a high-profile media figure would come with backlash. They'd say she was thin-skinned, emotional, weaponizing race. They always did. But Jasmine had had enough. "We need to stop pretending. Racial disrespect is part of the job," she told her legal advisor later that evening. "It's not. Not for me. Not for the next generation watching." By that night, her team issued a formal announcement. An $80 million lawsuit was being drafted, targeting both personal and professional damages. The number wasn't performative. It was intentional, just high enough to make headlines, but measured enough to be taken seriously. A message wrapped in law. There's a cost to crossing that line. Some media outlets tried to downplay it. "A bold move," one op-ed shrugged. "Political theater," said another. But others understood what was happening. The LA Times ran a front-page opinion piece titled, "The Cost of Silence in a Loud World." NPR aired a special on coded language and the unique burden Black women carry in public life. And just like that, the conversation began to shift. Jasmine hadn't asked to be at the center of it, but she stood there anyway, calm and unshaken, while the country watched. What no one saw coming was how quickly Karoline's empire would start to crumble. Because once the legal filing hit the public docket, officially submitted in Harris County, Texas, it landed like thunder. Jasmine's team wanted the case tried on her turf, under her state's scrutiny, in a court that had already hosted its share of political earthquakes. The lawsuit ran 63 pages long, and it was airtight. Every quote from Karoline's on-air remarks, every resurfaced tweet, every deflective comment made in the aftermath. No ambiguity, no wiggle room. The $80 million demand was broken down line by line. Loss of professional credibility, emotional distress, reputational harm. The long-term impact on Jasmine's ability to be seen as a fair, competent leader. But more than damages, it was about principle. And Jasmine had the right person to deliver it. Her lead counsel? Brandon Keyes, a litigation specialist out of San Antonio. Known for his precise language and brutal clarity, Brandon never raised his voice, but juries hung on every syllable. Jasmine liked that. I want facts, not fury, she told him. He nodded once. Then that's what we'll give them. A day later, he stood at the courthouse steps, flanked by Jasmine and Samira. The press had gathered, mics pointed like rifles. This is not about political disagreement, Brandon said evenly. This is about calculated defamation and the public assassination of character under the false banner of free speech. Reporters scrambled. Cameras rolled. Jasmine didn't speak until the very end, and when she did, it wasn't from a teleprompter. I've seen what happens when you let things slide, she said. I've watched the world excuse it, laugh it off, and call it discourse. But this time, I'm not letting it go. Not because I'm angry, because I'm ready. When you laugh it off, when you take the high road, people assume they can keep going. Jasmine's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. But words matter. This lawsuit isn't just about me. It's about every black woman who's ever had to shrink herself to fit into spaces she earned. She finished, and for a long beat, there wasn't a sound. The crowd stood in silence, the weight of her words still sinking in. Across the country, in conference rooms, production offices, and sponsor suites, Karoline Leavitt's team was unraveling. What had started as routine spin control had spiraled into full-blown crisis management. Corporate sponsors were calling, nervously. Contracts were paused. One major network scrapped a docuseries deal with her just days before filming. Her inbox, once overflowing, went silent. Her phone stopped ringing. Even her longtime agent, the one who once called her the future of conservative media, quietly stepped away. Still, Karoline refused to flinch. From her home in New Hampshire, she filmed a video, sitting stiffly in front of an American flag, her tone cold and defiant. This is a witch hunt, she said. Cancel culture on steroids. I said what I said. I'm not walking it back to appease the mob. But the more she resisted, the worse it got. Former interns began speaking out. Anonymous sources leaked internal emails. It wasn't a slip, it was a pattern. Karoline had, on multiple occasions, encouraged strategic provocation, especially when facing progressive women of color. Her brand wasn't just blunt, it was weaponized. Jasmine, meanwhile, went back to work like nothing had happened. She held town halls, voted on bills, met with constituents, no interviews, no media parade. She stayed grounded, deliberate, determined to show the public she wasn't hiding behind a lawsuit. She was standing through it, but it wasn't easy. One night after a late meeting, Samira noticed her sitting in the darkened office, phone in hand, thumb hovering over a text. You okay? Samira asked gently. Jasmine nodded but didn't look up. The silence lingered. You can say you're tired. I'm not tired, Jasmine said quietly. I'm calculating. Every move matters now. The pressure was relentless. Her inbox, flooded with support, but also venom. Accusations of playing the race card, of exploiting the system, of dividing the country. She didn't respond. Not to a single one, because her response wasn't going to be online. Her response would be in court. Brandon Keyes was building the case with surgical precision. Depositions scheduled. Witnesses lined up. One producer from the Austin panel agreed to testify, confirming the comments were unscripted, and that the energy in the room shifted the moment they were spoken. "I've been doing this for 20 years, the producer said, "and I've never seen anything land like that." Legal analysts began weighing in. The View ran a segment. CNN called it one of the cleanest public defamation cases in recent memory. The timing, the context, the history. "It's all right there," one expert said. But there was still risk. If Jasmine lost, the backlash would be vicious. She'd be mocked as performative, accused of chasing money, called thin-skinned, divisive, calculated. But pressure doesn't always crush. Sometimes it sharpens, and Jasmine was razor sharp now. The day after headlines broke, Karoline lost a university speaking engagement in Kansas. The official reason? Logistical conflicts. The real reason? They didn't want protests flooding their auditorium. A week later, 2 of her podcast sponsors, both wellness brands, quietly pulled out. No statements. Just gone. Still, Karoline didn't panic. Not yet. She went live on her platform. Hair pinned, blazer crisp, backdropped by her usual flag. Her voice was firm. "They want to silence me. That's what this is. Political warfare dressed up like a lawsuit." The video drew clicks. Her base applauded. But outside that echo chamber, people weren't buying it. Because the problem wasn't the lawsuit. It was the receipts, screenshots, clips, unedited transcripts. Things she'd said before that now looked even worse under scrutiny. Even conservative media outlets began pulling back. One national host scrapped a planned segment defending her after reviewing the panel footage. He turned to his staff and said, "We're not touching that, not with her track record." Inside Karoline's circle, the silence was growing. Her PR manager stepped back. Her longtime friend stopped returning calls. No loud exits, just distance. She still had loyalists online, trolls, commenters, partisan pundits. But sponsors don't fund controversy. They fund trust, and Karoline was hemorrhaging it. Then came the final blow. An email leak, screenshots from her early campaign days, internal communications, deliberate language, tactical framing, and the clear picture they painted? This wasn't an accident. It was a strategy, and now it was unraveling, publicly, permanently. Among the leaked materials was a page of strategy notes, typed, highlighted, deliberate. One bullet point read, "Disrupt liberal women of color mid-sentence, throw off their rhythm." It wasn't illegal, but it was calculated, and it was ugly. Worse, it aligned perfectly with what Jasmine's legal team had laid out in court. This wasn't a one-off. It was a pattern. Suddenly, even those who had backed Karoline began to flinch. One GOP consultant speaking off the record said bluntly, "She's radioactive now. This isn't just PR. It's a values problem." Through it all, Jasmine remained steady. No tweets, no shade, no celebratory threads. She let the silence speak, and that silence made Karoline's noise even louder. Brandon, ever composed, offered consistent counsel. "The court of public opinion is still in session. Stay measured." And she did, until a Saturday morning interview cracked the surface. Karoline appeared on a fringe digital news show, grinning, laughing. performing composure. Then the host leaned in. A lot of people feel like you were just saying what everyone thinks, especially about Jasmine Crockett. Let's be honest, people are tired of the race narrative. Karoline didn't push back. She just chuckled. Well, I won't say you're wrong. 10 seconds. That's all it took. By nightfall, the clip had exploded across the internet. But this time, it wasn't just a political flashpoint. It was personal. Jasmine's team was overwhelmed. Calls, messages, DMs poured in, not from pundits, but from teachers, nurses, veterans, from single mothers, from former Hill interns, from people exhausted by the idea that their identity was a narrative. Samira dropped the printed transcript on Jasmine's desk. She's spiraling, she said. Jasmine barely glanced at it. She already fell, she murmured. Now she's just making dust. And still, the legal wheels turned. Karoline's attorneys filed a motion to dismiss, citing First Amendment protections. The judge denied it. The court date was officially set. Behind the scenes, the cracks widened. One former assistant contacted Brandon's office, offering to testify about the on-air baiting tactics Karoline used. An intern turned over prep documents, highlighted cue cards with pre-written digs to deploy when race or gender came up. This wasn't spontaneity. It was scripting, weaponized, and that changed everything. By the end of the month, Karoline's name was scrubbed from a major conservative conference speaker list. Negotiations with a prominent publisher abruptly ended. Her brand wasn't being torn down. It was collapsing. Not because Jasmine destroyed it, but because there was nothing solid underneath it to begin with. But the public wasn't done. And Jasmine, she was just getting started. Her voice, calm, clear, consistent, was reaching places Karoline never could. This wasn't just politics anymore. It was culture. In boardrooms, barbershops, classrooms, and kitchens, people were talking. And they weren't whispering. In Phoenix, a city council meeting unrelated to the case opened with a public comment referencing Jasmine's lawsuit. In Nashville, a middle school Black History Month project asked students to write about leadership. Nearly half chose Jasmine Crockett. The moment had become a movement. Cable networks scrambled to keep up. Panel after panel dissected it. But what caught everyone off guard was the shift in tone, from people who'd once stayed neutral, or even leaned right. They weren't flipping for applause. They were seeing it differently now, through the eyes of their daughters, their students, their colleagues. She didn't even flinch, one commentator said during a live broadcast. That's what got me. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't play to the camera. She stood in it, held the weight, and stayed still. It was that stillness, controlled, rooted, that people couldn't stop talking about. It wasn't the noise that changed things. It was the refusal to make any... It became iconic. A freeze frame that didn't just say, "I'm used to this." It said, "I'm not accepting it anymore." It was more than a reaction. It was a reckoning. Civil rights groups didn't launch protests. They held town halls, conversations, reflections. At a liberal arts college in Oregon, a roundtable titled "Respect in Public Discourse, Beyond the Surface" drew a full auditorium. Jasmine didn't attend. She didn't have to. Her name came up more than 30 times when the moderator asked, "What does strength in leadership look like?" A young woman answered without hesitation, "It looks like knowing when to speak and when not to dignify nonsense." Meanwhile, Karoline's reputation continued to erode. A viral post from a former college roommate described her as someone who treated confrontation like a game, who didn't just lean into identity politics, but weaponized them. Another former media collaborator came forward with a story from a training session. Karoline had allegedly rehearsed how to interrupt opponents, specifically women of color, just enough to unbalance them on live panels. It wasn't hearsay anymore. It was a chorus. Karoline still had defenders, mostly loud, mostly online. But the tide had shifted. What once looked like political strategy now looked like something much darker. The lawsuit no longer felt like partisan theater. It was personal. It was principled. It meant something. Back in Dallas, Jasmine kept her schedule. Town halls, school visits, fundraisers. But she could feel the shift too. At a modest event in Garland, an elderly woman approached her, pressed a small plastic bag into her hand. Inside, a pair of earrings. "My mother gave me these when I turned 30. Said they were for speaking your truth. You wear them now." Jasmine tried to refuse, but the woman shook her head. "Don't give them back. Just pass them forward when it's time." It wasn't the headlines that moved her most, not the trending hashtags. It was that. The quiet affirmations, the sacred, wordless handoffs of strength. Brandon noticed it too. After a morning strategy call, he pulled her aside. "You know what people are seeing now? They're seeing someone who didn't let the insult be the end of the story." Jasmine looked at him, calm. It was never about the insult. It was the pattern. And she was right. This wasn't just about what Karoline said. It was about the culture that let her say it over and over, without consequence. That silence had finally broken. In staff training rooms across public schools, her case became a discussion, point for inclusive language. A nonprofit in Minneapolis, named Jasmine Woman of the Year for challenging the culture of quiet endurance with unapologetic resolve. Still, Jasmine avoided the spotlight. No press tour, no victory lap. But her voice carried. At a youth summit in Tulsa, she gave a short speech that trended within hours. "I didn't sue to make a name for myself. I sued because sometimes you have to say, enough. Enough pretending some lines aren't real. Enough acting like we're too fragile to demand respect. I didn't want a spotlight. I wanted a standard." While her words lifted people up, Karoline kept falling. And her next move would only make things worse. There was a kind of silence that came once the cameras were gone. Not peace. Something heavier. Jasmine felt it most late at night, when the world was still and she wasn't Congresswoman Crockett or a trending name. She was just Jasmine, a daughter, a woman, alone with the static of her own thoughts. She didn't cry. But she hadn't really slept either. The fight was necessary. That didn't make it easy. Her father called one quiet Sunday. Leroy Crockett had marched in the 70s, been arrested in Baton Rouge during a sit-in. His voice was slower now, but it still carried gravity. "You holding up, baby?" "I'm all right," she answered. "You sure?" "No, but I'm still standing." He chuckled, low and warm. "That's what we do. We stand." Then a pause. "You remind me of your grandmother." That stopped her. "Why?" She never raised her voice either. But when she looked at you, you knew exactly where she stood. Same eyes you got now. Jasmine swallowed hard. She didn't answer. But she held on to that. Because this wasn't just her name on the line anymore. It was for every woman ever told to stay small, to smile more, to sit down. That's what kept her going. When fatigue pressed in from all sides, Samira saw the toll up close. She was there during the late-night meetings, the fork frozen halfway to her mouth, as another call buzzed in. She saw the silence after yet another anonymous email accusing Jasmine of being too loud, for someone who doesn't belong. One night, Samira asked gently, "You ever think about just walking away?" Jasmine didn't flinch. Every day. Then I remember who's watching. The team had grown tighter, more protective. Brandon reviewed every press statement with surgical precision. Jasmine kept her phone close, because at any moment, a single message could be another landmine. But there were moments of light, too. A college student from Oakland sent her a handmade card, just construction paper, glitter, and a short handwritten note. "You helped me find my voice. I didn't know I had one. Card stood out from the rest. It was simple. Construction paper, glitter, barely held together with tape. Inside, a scrawled message in purple ink. You look like someone I want to be when I grow up. Please don't stop." Jasmine didn't frame that one. She tucked it into her wallet. Close, quiet, constant. Meanwhile, Karoline was coming undone. She never admitted it, not even to herself. But inside her Connecticut home, the spiral had started. She was snapping at assistants, second-guessing every move her new PR rep suggested. He'd told her to go dark for a few weeks. She told him he didn't understand the stakes. The fights with her fiancé had become daily. "You're not standing by me," she accused. "What do you want me to say?" He shot back. "That people misunderstood you? They didn't." The walls were closing in. Still, she couldn't help herself. She gave another podcast interview. Her voice trembled, just slightly. "I just think this is all blown out of proportion. I mean, if we're suing people over opinions, what's next?" But no one was buying it, because this wasn't about opinion anymore. It was about pattern. It was about intent. It was about harm. And Jasmine's legal team? They were meticulous. Every day the case sharpened. Another former employee came forward, this time with a recording. Karoline, in a staff meeting, reading hate mail addressed to black women in Congress. Laughing. "Free content," she'd called it. It wasn't just a lawsuit now. It was a character study, and Karoline was failing. Jasmine, meanwhile, stayed locked in. Hours spent in prep with Brandon, reviewing depositions, fact-checking transcripts. Every word she'd ever spoken on the matter was held to scrutiny. No loose ends, no contradictions. "I didn't come this far to trip on a cracked sidewalk," she said during one late-night strategy session. Brandon smiled. "You won't. You walk like someone who's been watching the ground her whole life." But while Jasmine kept her footing, Karoline was lacing up for a fall. She still had supporters. Loud ones, mostly online. They reposted her appearances on fringe outlets with hashtags like, "Does she speaks truth?" and "Saw free speech under fire." But inside, Karoline Leavitt's world, the cracks were deepening and widening. It all led to one Wednesday afternoon, her last real swing. She went live on her personal channel. No network, no filters, no handlers. Just Karoline. Unedited. And that was the problem. Just Karoline, alone in her home office. Hair pulled back, dark circles under her eyes, jaw tight, voice edged with defiance. "I'm done being polite," she snapped into the camera. "I'm done letting the left twist this into something it's not." She leaned forward. "I didn't attack Jasmine Crockett. I challenged her. I called out hypocrisy, and now I'm being sued for saying what every American should have the right to say without fear." She paused, reaching for a mug carefully placed in the frame. Stars and stripes, manufactured patriotism. "She's not hurt," she said. "She's playing a role. This is about silencing dissent. They want people like me erased, cancelled." Her voice sharpened again. "But I'm not going anywhere." The comments poured in, some praising her, others eviscerating her. Screenshots hit Twitter within the hour. But this time, the fallout wasn't just digital. 30 minutes after the stream ended, her last remaining agent terminated their contract. A major political action committee erased her name from futures, fundraising events. And then came the blow that cracked the veneer. Her former campaign manager went public. "This lawsuit is a long overdue response to behavior we've tolerated far too long," he said. That stung. She'd trusted him, confided. Her long-term plan, to be the storm that shook the system. Now he was calling her the system. Not a disruptor, a symbol of decay, a mouthpiece for disrespect in a blazer, he wrote. But the real collapse came 2 days later. A live stream interview with a minor YouTuber. No script, no filter. She leaned back in her chair, waved a hand. Jasmine's whole brand is being a victim. That's what she does. I poke her a little and suddenly I'm in court. Please? The host chuckled. Karoline smirked. And that was it. A junior staffer on Jasmine's team clipped the moment, sent it straight to Brandon. He didn't text back. He picked up the phone. "You watching this?" he asked a trusted legal analyst. The reply came fast. "Oh yeah, that's the final nail." The clip exploded online. But something shifted this time. A respected conservative columnist penned a blistering op-ed titled, "When Being Right Means Knowing When to Stop Talking." She dissected Karoline's spiral. Not just the comments, but the culture she'd helped create. "There's a line between principle and pride," she wrote. Karoline crossed it, weeks ago. What we're watching now is self-destruction in real time. Even longtime donors started calling Jasmine's office, not to apologize, but to distance. "We see it now," they said. "We just don't want to be part of it." And Karoline felt it, deeper than tweets or headlines. The real silence. Friends who didn't return texts. Family who suggested she take a break. A cousin who quietly blocked her on Facebook. For someone who'd lived on visibility, invisibility was its own kind of hell. She second-guessed everything. Her publicist, her message, the plan. Nothing was working. The narrative was no longer hers to spin. She wasn't a rising star anymore. She was a warning. Meanwhile, Jasmine had gone quiet. No press, no statements, no appearances. But the silence didn't feel like absence. It felt intentional. People revisited her words, testimonies, old legal arguments, speeches from early House sessions. She didn't have to remind the world who she was. The world already knew. Karoline had tried to drag her name through the mud, and instead Jasmine looked cleaner than ever. But while Karoline unraveled behind closed doors, Jasmine was preparing the moment that would crystallize it all. Not for headlines, for history. The auditorium at Spelman College was packed, not a lawsuit rally. A campus series on leadership and civic responsibility. But everyone knew why they were there. No lights, no spectacle. Jasmine walked on stage in a charcoal gray pantsuit. Clean lines, no embellishment. The applause was deep, respectful, earned. She stepped up to the podium, adjusted the mic, scanned the room. And when she spoke, her voice was soft, steady. "When I was a little girl, I used to be afraid of microphones. Laughter bubbled through the crowd, warm, knowing. The tension broke. But what came next would silence the room all over again." Jasmine smiled, not because she didn't have anything to say, but because, for a long time, she wasn't sure anyone would really hear her. "It's not always about what you say," she told the room. "It's about who they think is saying it." Silence settled across the auditorium. She never once said Karoline's name. She didn't have to. Instead, she spoke of duality, of what it means to be both black and female in American politics, of how people judge not just your words, but your tone, your posture, your very presence. Silence isn't always weakness, she said, and composure isn't the same as compliance. The tension in the room became reverent. It's not my job to make people comfortable with the truth, Jasmine said, voice steady. It's my job to tell it, even when it feels like a risk. The crowd erupted. Students leapt to their feet. Phones rose into the air. Some caught the moment. Others just wanted to remember it. She kept going. She spoke of dignity, of boundaries, of refusing to laugh at cruelty just to keep a room from turning cold. You can be civil and still confront. You can be gracious and still demand better. Those aren't opposites. They're tools. You just have to know when to use which. People didn't just listen. They responded. Nods, snaps, tears welling in the eyes of older faculty members who had waited their whole careers to hear this moment on that stage. Backstage, Samira watched with her arms crossed. Steady, proud. Brandon stood beside her. No notes, no distractions. Just listening. Because this wasn't strategy anymore. This was substance. After the speech, during the Q&A, a young woman, maybe 19, stood and asked, "How do you stay calm when someone tries to reduce you to a stereotype in real time?" Jasmine took a breath. "Because I know I'm not what they say," she answered. "And the moment I react to prove I'm not, I give them control. I don't perform for disrespect. I correct it. With purpose." The room was still, then electric. That line was clipped and shared before Jasmine even stepped off the stage. By nightfall, it was everywhere. Journalists reposted it. Celebrities shared it. Even those who'd stayed quiet before suddenly found their voice. CNN aired the full speech. MSNBC ran highlights in prime time. The Library of Congress posted a quote from it on Instagram. On TikTok, someone painted her portrait in oil as her voice played behind the brushstrokes. But this wasn't just viral. It was validating. For the first time in weeks, Jasmine slept through the night. No headlines to brace for, no misquotes to clean up. Because she hadn't defended herself. She'd defined herself. And even those who hadn't taken sides before were beginning to see the truth. This wasn't a spat between two women in politics. It wasn't a courtroom stunt. It was a boundary being drawn, in bold. The difference between critique and disrespect, between questioning power and punishing the presence of it. Karoline had challenged Jasmine's place. Jasmine had challenged the assumption she ever had to justify it. And just as that clarity took hold in the public's imagination, a final, quiet move was being prepared behind the scenes, one that would end the case. Without a single gavel, dropped. The trial had been scheduled for the following month in Harris County. Jury selection had already begun. Jasmine's legal team had prepared for war. But on a rainy Thursday morning, 3 weeks before opening arguments, Brandon's phone lit up. Karoline Leavitt's new attorney. Calling. They wanted to settle. No cameras, no trial, no spectacle, just quiet paperwork, NDAs, and a number. Brandon didn't speak at first. He just said, "Put it in writing." 2 hours later, the offer arrived. 8 figures. No admission of guilt, but a full financial settlement. And a binding agreement that Karoline Leavitt would step away from all public-facing roles for a minimum of 24 months. She wouldn't lose her voice. But for the first time, she'd have to sit in silence. No new podcasts, no interviews, no TV appearances. Silence. When Brandon showed Jasmine the numbers, She looked at him without blinking. "She's not apologizing," he said. "No," Jasmine replied quietly, "but she's vanishing." Jasmine didn't answer right away. She walked to the window of her office, staring out at the early evening drizzle streaking down the glass. Samira sat silently across from her, arms folded. After a long moment, Jasmine turned back. "We're not doing this for the money," she said. "If I sign this, it's to move forward, not to let her off easy." Brandon nodded. "She's not off easy. She's done." And he was right. Within 48 hours, the agreement was signed, the terms sealed. Karoline released a generic statement, through her attorney, saying she'd chosen to focus on her personal life, taking a step back from politics and media, reflecting. No interviews followed, no live streams, no angry rebuttals. For someone who once thrived in the spotlight, the silence felt like erasure. But Jasmine's silence, that had been louder, and now it was final. The media reacted with mixed feelings. Some outlets praised the closure, others wished for a public reckoning. But the people who mattered, those who had followed every step, understood what had really happened. The woman who built her career on provocation had finally run out of places to point the blame. And Jasmine? She didn't throw a party, no victory video. She stuck to her routine, town halls, committee meetings, school visits. But something had shifted. There was a lightness in her shoulders, a quiet confidence people could feel. One night at a community center in Waco, someone asked her how she felt about the outcome. She smiled. Not smug, not triumphant, just certain. "I didn't need a courtroom to prove my worth," she said. "I needed the world to see that lines still exist, and crossing them comes with a cost." A few claps turned into a standing ovation. Outside that building, something changed. People started using her name as a reference point, not just in politics, but in everyday life. Parents told their daughters, "Speak like Jasmine." Teachers reminded students, "Lead like Jasmine." Local councils quoted her in resolutions on respect and accountability. She hadn't won a media war. She'd won a cultural moment, and perhaps most importantly, she hadn't lost herself in the process. As for Karoline, she disappeared from the airwaves. Sponsors didn't come back. Her podcast feed went silent. Her name stopped trending. The public didn't forget. But they moved on without her, because this wasn't about taking someone down. It was about showing what rising looks like. Not loud, not flashy, just steady, determined, and clear. Now the only thing left was to keep moving forward, to remind the world. Silence doesn't mean surrender. Sometimes it means strength. This was never just about two women on opposite sides of a political panel, not about a viral clip or who got cancelled or who walked away with a paycheck. If that's all people saw, they missed the point entirely. This was about what happens when someone finally says, "No more." For years, women like Jasmine Crockett were told to let things go, laugh it off, take the high road, because the alternative, the fight, was too messy, too loud, too risky. But silence had been misunderstood. It wasn't agreement, it wasn't weakness, it was survival. Until it became resistance. The truth is, not every battle is won in a courtroom, and not every win is loud. Sometimes it's the quiet shift that matters most, the moment someone finally holds the line, not just for themselves, but for everyone watching. Jasmine's story reached people who never even followed politics. Mothers overlooked at work, students mocked for speaking up, professionals talked over, disrespected, diminished. Her Victory wasn't in the money or the media. It was in the mirror she held up. A mirror that forced people to ask, what am I tolerating? What am I calling just words when it's really an attack? It reminded people words have weight, tone has power, and silence, when used with intention, can be deafening. Karoline Leavitt didn't vanish because someone destroyed her. She vanished because she didn't understand the rules had changed. She thought outrage was a game she could win. But this wasn't outrage. This was accountability, and that's what sticks. Because Jasmine didn't throw punches. She stood her ground, and she made the country look at itself, whether it wanted to or not. Brandon once said, "The court of public opinion is unpredictable. But in this case, the people saw what happened, they felt it, and they decided, enough." Yeah, a world told to pick sides fast, where algorithms turn pain into content. Jasmine showed what it means to move with intention, with dignity. She taught us you don't have to shout to be heard. You don't have to burn bridges to hold people accountable. You just have to stay firm, long enough for the truth to catch up. And when it does, it doesn't need a spotlight. It carries its own light. So, if you're watching this and wondering what to do when someone tries to reduce you, silence you, or distort you, remember this story. Remember Jasmine's stillness, her focus, her decision to choose clarity over chaos. Then ask yourself, where do I need to draw the line? Because once you do, the world begins to rearrange itself around it. If this story made you pause, reflect, or feel seen, don't keep it to yourself. Share it. Talk about it. Use it. And if you haven't already, subscribe for more stories that speak truth without yelling, and remind us what real strength looks like.